Bob Fennessy. I'm the town administrator for the town of Carver. And I'm here putting on a new show for the townspeople. This is going to be probably a monthly show that we're producing during my lunch hour, so that it'll highlight people that we'll bring in to the studio and have a coffee and conversation, just to let people know what's going on. And I hope it'll be interesting for people to hear from different sources of information. It might be people, places, things that we'll be talking about. So I just want to introduce myself. This is exciting for me, and I hope it is for you too when you watch it. So my very first guest, after a year and a half being a town administrator, is Brian Wick. He's the executive director of the Cape Cod Cranberry Growers Association. And I'm going to introduce Brian. Hi, Brian.
Hi.
Thank you for coming in.
Happy to be here.
First guest.
Yeah, very exciting.
So why don't you start by talking a little bit about yourself, and then about the Cranberry Growers Association, how that formed and what it's doing now.
Sure. So I've been in cranberries for almost 30 years now. It started as a very accidental career path. I had no intention of getting into cranberries. Graduated from college, and I was looking to be a high school biology teacher. And at that time, the industry was depressed, and Ocean Spray was looking for summer technicians to work in their newly created agricultural research facility, studying the pests of cranberry bogs. Mm-hmm. So I did that for a few months, and that turned into a 12-year career there. I advanced into other things like crop forecasting and data analysis and things like that, but always working with the growers in the grower relations department. And then I took a little hiatus to do some internet project management. And then when the dot-com bubble burst, I got back into cranberries. Yeah. Again, never thought I'd go back to cranberries when I left Ocean Spray, but I came back at the Growers Association, working with the regulatory end of things, and I've been the executive director at the association now for the last 6-7 years, so I lose track of time.
Yeah.
I've been there for about 15 years or so now. So.
Good. So you're kind of a cranberry expert, so to speak.
Yeah, I know a lot about cranberries. I can't grow a single berry to save my life.
Really?
I've never grown a crop. I leave that to the growers.
Well, like me, you probably eat a lot of cranberries.
I do eat them,
Yeah.
I like to eat them.
Yeah.
And I know a lot about them, but that's about it.
So what is the association doing now? And how did that develop?
So the association's been around since 1888.
Wow.
So it's one of the older farming organizations in the country. And it was established on Cape Cod, which is how it got its name, by a group of growers who wanted to standardize how cranberries were sold. They agreed upon the barrel. A 100-pound wooden barrel of cranberries was going to be the unit of measure. And they also wanted to help stabilize the marketing of the crop and the pricing, and try to bring some stability to the industry. That's why it was formed. Mm-hmm. And today we don't get involved in the pricing or the marketing of it, but the association represents the cranberry growers of Massachusetts. So there's about 300 growers, and we represent them. We do advocacy for them, help them with understanding the regulations and policies, and making sure that they understand how to comply with those. If there's something that's maybe inadvertently could harm their industry, they will advocate for them, whoever that agency it might be, or town that might be implementing something that might be counter to the industry. So we'll make sure that we can work out some kind of relationship there. We help them find grants, opportunities to help them on their bogs, find programs. We do some advocacy in the public, like what we're doing here now, community outreach, that sort of thing, to help keep cranberries top of mind if we can in the communities, and just be a good partner as best we can with our local communities and our growers.
Yeah, and it's always good to buy local.
Absolutely.
And that's I'm assuming in the cranberry industry too. A lot of that is used within the region.
Right. Yeah, we have small regional brands, and we also have the bigger brands. But we certainly encourage to buy local. And when you're buying cranberries, you don't exactly know where it may be coming from, unless it's truly a local brand. Mm-hmm. But purchasing cranberries and consuming cranberries does help all the cranberry growers in Massachusetts for sure, by keeping the industry strong.
So where does Massachusetts stand now in terms of national or international cranberry growing?
We're the second largest in the U.S. third largest if you bring Canada into the equation. Quebec produces more cranberries than Massachusetts does now.
Does it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a newer growing region. They've been growing cranberries up there since the 1940s, but the last 10 to 20 years they've really ramped up their production and have become a major player in the industry.
So they get enough sun and enough warm weather to.
They do,
that?
yeah. The growing season is shorter,
Yeah.
for sure. And they also have some advantages because the pests aren't as prolific up there because it's a newer growing region. You know, in Massachusetts, we've been growing cranberries for 200 years here, cultivating them, and then they've been wild since the glaciers left. So we've had thousands of years of cranberries growing here, which provides thousands of years of pests to grow along
Yes,
with them and
yes.
evolve. Whereas Canada, they don't have that, so they have less pest pressure. And because it's colder up there, they don't have as much rot pressure either. So they have some advantages of growing in Canada that we don't have here.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So my next question is that about 49% of Carver has cranberry bogs on it. And that's amazing to me when I first came to Carver a year and a half ago. And what do you see as the farming industry in Carver in the future? Is it to grow? Is it to remain stable? Or is it dwindling?
It's kind of all of the above.
Oh, really? It
Yeah,
depends.
well, it's certainly critically important for Carver, as we know, just in terms of the acreage, the non-bog land, the support land that goes with the cranberries. You know, thousands of acres are in Carver, and we're also seeing, though, a little bit of a shift in the industry right now, where many of our bogs are older. Some of them are 100-plus-year-old cranberry vines, the same vines that have been there for all those years. They're losing some of their vigor. The manufacturers are looking for bigger berries to make the dried cranberry products. So some of our older traditional varieties don't compete as well in the marketplace. They still make great cranberry cranberry sauce, fresh fruit, but those are smaller, more niche part of the industry. The dry cranberries and the juice are the big drivers. So some of these older bogs also don't produce as much as the newer ones do. So growers are at kind of a tipping point now where they need to reinvest in their cranberry bogs, put in newer varieties, and we can talk about that later, and make the bogs more economically viable. And that's what the marketplace is looking for. But it's very expensive to do that, time consuming. And if you're an older grower, it takes could take 10, 12 years to start to see the return on your investment. So it's a long-term proposition to retool or replant a cranberry bog. So if you don't have the next generation coming in, you may decide that's not for me and it might be time to exit. So we're seeing some growers leave the industry. Some of the bogs, if they're producing well, will be purchased by other cranberry growers. But we're also seeing some bogs just retire and they may be converted back into natural wetlands. So we're seeing some of that. We're seeing some growers exit the industry. So I think what we're going to see over the next 10, 20 years is potentially a small decline in the number of growers, but I think the production will stay steady or actually may increase because the growers are going to be, that are remaining here, will be reinvesting in their bogs. So the production will actually probably go up, or at least stay steady. So I think we're seeing a lot of different factors going on. So the acreage might drop slightly as some of these bogs retire, but the ones that stay here will produce well. So we're kind of seeing a shift in the industry right now.
Yeah, and so there's sometimes there's issues with farming, all farming, and I'm sure cranberry farming is similar, where you could have down years from weather, from pests, from other
Climate change.
anything that puts them in a position where they can't afford to keep it going without some kind of state or federal help. Are there programs out there for cranberry farmers to get additional help?
Cranberries are a commodity like anything else. Like you said, the good years, bad years, so you might be making some money, you might be losing some money. The marketplace is a big driver in that. So that's one of the challenges of growing. Obviously, you have to be profitable. And for both the mid 2000s, 2010, 2011, we started to see a slow price decline in cranberries that continued right up until the last few years. And for some of our growers, they were growing at below their cost of production. So the price they were receiving for their fruit was below their cost of production for many years. They were using their life savings basically to keep the
But
farm
they hung
going.
in.
And yeah, so that's obviously not sustainable. So fortunately, the pricing has gone up now. But those impacts are very real, and the growers are still trying to recover from those time periods. And to reinvest in the bogs, like I talked about, to take your older bogs and make them more vibrant, more productive, is on average anywhere between $35,000 to $75,000 an acre to do that. So let's say
Wow.
in the 50s is probably your average price. So it's very expensive to do it. And our growers, particularly in these 20 teens, as we'll call them, they couldn't get the capital to do it. They didn't have the finances because they were using everything they had to keep the farm going. Banks wouldn't loan them money to do these expensive renovation projects because they weren't making enough money. So they were caught in this awful cyclical problem. And even now with the pricing, it's still not, it's going to take a while to recover, and price will never be what it was for cranberries in the 80s or the early 90s. Those days are probably long gone. So we have some state programs that are helping growers with grants, competitive grants, where they can get some money to help infuse and put it into the bog to replant the bogs. We call it bog renovation. And so there's a granting program. We've had several years of it now where growers can apply. It's very competitive. It's always oversubscribed. And the growers can get some cash to help them renovate the bogs. It's just a small amount, but it's enough that gives them that little bump where now they can get a loan, they can use some of their own money, put that all together and do a renovation project. And we have many growers who are saying that's the reason I'm still in business today, is because I can renovate these older bogs. Just a few acres might be enough on their farm to make the whole farm productive now, because they can get 2-3 times the production on the same footprint as compared to the older varieties.
Really? Yeah.
And when they do that, it's also the time to laser level the bog. They bring in fresh layer of sand, make the bog nice and smooth and level, put in a new irrigation system, new pumps, upgrade all that, new flumes. And because of that, they use less water. So actually a renovated cranberry bog is better in terms of water consumption, and which is good for the environment, and better for the grower because they're getting more production off of that acreage. So it's and the Commonwealth has recognized that. So that's why they're helping to invest in the retooling of these cranberry bogs. And there's also other programs that the state has where growers can apply for grants to get money to put in new irrigation systems, buy new pumps. Anything that has to do with water conservation, there's generally a state program. The Department of Agriculture has a program to help them with that. Energy programs, things like that. And then there's also federal programs. USDA, in particular the Natural Resource Conservation Service, provides cost-sharing money for growers to do conservation-type programs, which includes retooling or renovating a cranberry bog because you're laser leveling it. So you can get some money to do that. Irrigation systems, new pipes, things like that. Very similar to the state program. So some growers can get into both of those programs if they're fortunate enough to, which will really help them cobble something together so that they can have a sustainable operation.
Good.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's opportunities out
there's some
there.
help out there.
Yeah, and that's part of the role of the associations, to make sure that the growers know that those opportunities are out there and make them aware of it.
How many members are in the association?
So we have about 85% of the production in Massachusetts, so 270 or so cranberry growers. So we have most of the growers in Massachusetts, but not all of them.
Yeah.
It's volunteer.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So one question arises that I hear is that there's a dual use now. The focus is on a dual use of land for cranberries, and one of those uses is to have solar panels on top of the cranberries. Is that something that's picking up steam, or is it something that's kind of being reviewed and looked at for potentially another source of income for the farmers?
Yeah, so I would say it's slowed down in terms of its interest. So the state came out with a new program called the SMART program in, I think it's 2018. I've lost track of time. It's been a few years. And one of the uses is this dual use where you could have solar panels and then below that agricultural land. And the state incentivized that at the highest level because they were losing ag land to solar, particularly in the western part of the state. So they wanted to stop that. So they came up with this dual-use agrivoltaic program, which I think is pretty cool as a concept, where you can get solar energy and green energy and ag land underneath it, and it's growing in popularity across the country. So in cranberries, we have some growers who are looking into doing that. We have some who actively have projects permitted and are moving through the process of getting them installed on cranberry bogs. We're not going to see it widespread because it is a different way of farming. You have solar panels, and they have to be, by regulation, they have to be 8 to 10 feet above the cropland. So they're going to be higher up, and then you would have your cranberries growing underneath it. So you're going to be farming different. Some growers don't want any part of that. They're like, no, it's hard enough growing cranberries conventionally. I don't want to add a complication of solar panels on top of it. But for those that do, it provides an opportunity for another revenue stream coming onto the farm, which is consistent. Your solar payments that you would get are consistent. So you're going to get that stream of money coming in, which can help your whole farm stay viable. So for some growers, it's worth looking into. Others are looking at putting the solar panels on their adjacent ag lands. That's nothing new. But you could do that. You don't have to have it necessarily these big 40-acre swaths. You can do it in smaller chunks, so there's opportunities there. And there's also one that has not moved forward in any town that I'm aware of yet, but is the floating solar, where you can put these solar panels on these specially built platforms on a reservoir, and they float and they go up and down as the water goes up and down. And that's something that also is an opportunity, where now your reservoir that's providing water to your bog can also get income from the sun. So I think that's a fabulous concept that's very popular in Europe. We're starting to see it more in the United States now. It has to be in the right type of water body, and there's a lot of regulations to this. And there's a lot of regulatory oversight to all these programs. But basically what it's providing is an opportunity to keep that farm a farm by providing that additional revenue stream, which will help with the ups and downs of the commodity pricing of cranberries. It's providing that another steady source of income that the growers can realize. Cash flow is very important for farming. So it's something that we're going to continue to see over the next many years as this program with the state exists. The state may change the program at some point, but as it exists now, you're going to see some dual-use farms in Carver. There's no doubt about that. They're already being permitted. But I think the initial wave, like when this program was first released, we were getting inundated with solar companies, and the growers were getting cold calls from solar companies looking to do these projects. And that's kind of settled down a bit.
Yeah.
But I think it is an important part for me, just speaking as a citizen now, taking my cranberry hat off. I think it's a great opportunity to get some green energy on the same footprint that you're growing a crop, or on your same property. I know some people don't feel the same way. I understand that. I don't have the NIMBYism. I don't see solar as this vile commercial aspect that some people do, but I think solar is a great opportunity in the right location for the right person. I don't want to see the whole town plastered with solar panels. I don't think anybody wants that. Yeah. But in the right spot, with the right screening and the right setup, I personally think it's something that we as a society need to be looking at, because we recognize climate change is here. We have a lot of challenges with our climate. We really need to start looking at alternative energy uses besides our fossil fuels. And nuclear doesn't seem to be particularly popular. Hydro isn't popular because of the damming aspect. Solar, to me, is a good option, and some of our growers are looking into it.
Yeah. So has that been used in other farming situations, not cranberries?
Yes. Yeah. So there's other crops that are growing under the solar panels.
And has it had
livestock.
an effect on the crops itself in terms of not getting enough sun, or?
That's one of the challenges. So in the regulations, you can't have more than 50% of your crop acreage covered by the panels, which will allow enough light to filter in. And with cranberries, because it's never been done before, there isn't this bank of scientific data to show exactly what's going to happen. We know it's going to reduce the crop somewhat. And that's why the state provides the highest incentive for this on ag land, because they know there's going to be a reduction in your crop to some extent. The UMass Cranberry Station, which is in Wareham, and they study cranberries, they've done some preliminary work and have identified that the cranberries will grow under the panels. And in some instances, they say that it may help retain moisture. So in drought years, there might actually be a benefit to them. But it's very preliminary. And some of the projects that are being permitted in Carver, actually as part of that permit, part of that process, is that they will be studied by the cranberry station. It's written right into the agreement with the town, as I understand it, so that the cranberry station will come out and continue to study this. They're going to put the panels at different spacings and things like that to really get a better understanding of it, which will help in the long term with that. And also at UMass, but at Amherst, they're studying other crops as well, traditional fruit and vegetable crops that are growing under panels to study that as well. So I think in an ideal world, you would have had more science before the state came out with their program, but it just didn't work that way. So there's a little bit of the panels might be a little bit ahead of the science in terms of how they grow. But there's enough evidence, anecdotal, and just the understanding that the cranberries will grow under these panels. It's not as if they're not going to grow. And if they don't grow, then you lose your dual use exemption through the state.
So how do they monitor that, though?
The state is going to require records, crop records, that the grower has to file each year with the state. And
But if they assume that there'll be a reduction anyway,
there is.
is it
But
a 20%? Is it a 50%?
they don't have a percentage, which is kind of the challenge. Like for me, sitting in my seat, for any of these dual-use projects, I want them to be a cranberry first, cranberry mindset, and not just have it be solar companies coming in looking for an opportunity to make a quick hit and beat out of town, and who cares if that bog gets trashed or the community hates it. So that is my concern too, is I want to make sure that there's enough teeth to the regulations so that you're not bringing in a little barrel of cranberries from your 5-acre bog and say, yep, I grew 200 berries out there. I met the letter of the law. So the state is really going to have to enforce that and make sure that this is working, that the grower and the solar company are doing the right things. And the growers that I know that are involved in these projects are the type that are going to be doing the right thing. And because they're still looking to grow the biggest crop that they can. So we just want to, it's something that's healthy for the state and our communities to look at, to make sure that these projects are above board and they're doing the right thing. And I also always encourage when I speak to communities about this sort of thing. I'm not a solar advocate, and that's not my end of the world, but I know enough about it that it's involved with cranberries. And to make sure that when the time comes for decommissioning these solar panels, that's written into the agreement between the grower.
Usually they are.
Exactly, because that's important
because that's
too.
costly.
You don't want them
or just leaving there.
Exactly,
and then shutting down it.
So there's always got to be that balance between the community and whatever happens, in this case solar, to make sure that things are done right and the interests of everyone are looked after. So and I think Carver's done a good job in that. You've had a bylaw review committee, and there's been a lot of work that goes into it. I think that's the key, is having an open mind and bringing in the experts and really studying it. It really makes a big difference in writing good bylaws.
So everybody knows what a cranberry looks like. You see it at Thanksgiving, usually. It doesn't just come in a can. It also comes whole.
Right.
But you had mentioned that there's different varieties that are out there now.
Right.
And you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's many different varieties of cranberries. Some are what we call our heirloom, or the traditional ones that are wild, selections from the wild that have been around for generations. And so in Massachusetts, there's probably easily 25 or so of those that are grown. And then there's newer, what we call hybrids, which are just traditional crosses, taking those older varieties, the best traits of them, crossing them together, and coming up with a new variety. There's no genetically modified cranberries out there. That's all just traditional plant breeding. That's mostly done out of Rutgers University in New Jersey and also in Wisconsin. And these newer varieties that have been developed, as I mentioned, were much more prolific, can yield much greater. And there's probably I would say maybe 5 to 10 of these newer varieties that are quite commonly grown now. So in Massachusetts, we have about 12 different cranberry varieties that are probably making up most of the production in Massachusetts. The newer varieties and some of the older ones still here. And they have different characteristics, different sizes, different colors. Some are darker than others. They have different ripening periods, which is what the growers will like. So you don't want all your fruit to ripen at the same time, particularly if you have a large farm.
Yeah.
You want to spread that out as best you can. So there's early, mid, and late season varieties of cranberries. And some have slight differences in their flavor profile, the tartness in there. For many people, they can't tell the difference, but if you're a cranberry grower or used to consuming fresh cranberries, you can notice a difference. The older traditional heirloom varieties have a much more tart taste to them than the new varieties do. And the breeding programs that are continuing to evolve are now looking at other factors besides just initially they were looking at growing more cranberries. But now they're looking at finding ones that are rot resistant or drought resistant, which is helping with the climate change because those are the factors that we're going to be facing. And it takes quite a while to develop a new variety of cranberry, many years. So it's a long-term proposition. They're also even looking at a sweeter berry.
Really a non-tart berry.
Yeah, I don't think they'll ever get to the point of confusing it with the sweetness of, say, a blueberry or something like that. But they are certainly looking at trying to find something that has a little bit more sugar content to it. Because the good news with cranberries is that they're naturally low in sugar, but the bad news is that they're naturally low in sugar.
Yeah.
So it's trying to find that
So
balance.
do they also look for the ones that they're going to use for, say, cranberry juices? The type of cranberry used?
Yeah, so the manufacturers generally prefer a larger berry when they're making the dried cranberry product, the sweetened dried cranberry. And that because the slice is better and the consumer's looking for a certain size berry in the bag. And then the juice is a byproduct of that process. It used to be that it was juice-driven industry and the byproduct was a waste product. And then in the 90s, they developed, or the 2000s, they developed this sweetened dried cranberry product, which became so popular. That's really the driver now, and the juice is actually
really
the secondary. The juice is still incredibly important, don't get me wrong, but the number one seller across the board for the cranberry manufacturers is the dried cranberry product. It's sold all over the world and consumed in many different ways.
And obviously it stores better.
Yeah.
So you can move it over large periods of time as well as distance.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the juice market overall is flattening as consumers. As consumers we drink more water, and there's just a whole variety of beverages out there. So where juice was such a dominant force in the grocery stores in the 80s and 90s, that's slowly been trickling down as consumers are shifting their palate.
Yeah.
So still, obviously, a very important part of the industry, but the dried cranberry product came around at a good time.
Good. You had, I think we had talked one time about how you can get messages out to the people of the history of cranberries and the history in this area of farming cranberries, and there was some desire to maybe have some kind of a museum or something.
Right.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so if some people may remember the Ocean Spray Cranberry World that was in Plymouth for many years, and that closed down in the early 2000s, and it's kind of left a void in the local industry here of teaching the history and even the current state of the cranberry industry. So at the association, we're interested in creating a new cranberry educational center. And we're just starting a feasibility study right now to look at that, and because it needs to be obviously something that will, it doesn't need we're not looking to be rich upon it, but obviously it can't be a failing industry. We're a nonprofit, our money is tight, so we need to, if we're going to envelop or go into this different path, we need to make sure that it works from an economic standpoint. So we're looking to have this educational center where we can have bog tours function out of there, so the public can come in, learn about cranberries, and then also have a small museum which will speak to the history and heritage of cranberries, and also teach them about some of the modern farming techniques of cranberries. We'd like to see it have a small test kitchen, so we could have workshops on cooking and baking with cranberries in there. Big enough to bring school groups through and have some programs such as that. So that's our vision, and we're hoping
It's a great vision.
yeah, we're
and I
hoping
think-
to do it in Carver if we can. This is obviously a lot of cranberry bogs in
Yep.
Carver, very centrally located between Route 3 and 495, so it's great for tourists. So, check in
Carver
and,
would be a good place for it.
yeah, we're gonna try. We're gonna try.
That's awesome. Yeah. So right now, do you have tours going on?
Yes, we do have tours for the public
And how do they find those?
on our website, cranberries.org. We have a
Well, that's an easy one.
Yep, very
Cranberries.org.
yeah, very simple.
Oh, okay.
We have public tours that are in the fall, so weekends in October into early November. We have those for the public to come and.
So is
again,
that during the floating time when they
yeah,
float the
so
bog?
what we do is we guarantee that they'll be able to see floating cranberry somewhere. That's the,
Because that's impressive.
Yes,
especially
that's
for
what people wanna see.
City folk that
Right,
come out and
exactly.
it's like, whoa, really, it's
so we've started an educational program. We had a couple classes from the Carver school system. I think it was 5th grade, came over this spring, and we have what we call our small temporary cranberry center right now, which is just a cranberry grower who's given us some space to operate out of in their shop.
in Carver.
In Carver, which has been great and very helpful. So it's kind of getting us used to this bog tour business and educational, kind of getting our feet wet. So we're hoping to expand with other local schools, bringing them in the springtime to visit a cranberry bog and learn more about growing cranberries. And then we have charter tours that come in. So these tour companies that bring people through Plymouth and Cape Cod, we're one of the stops for some of those tours. So they come out, and that can be anywhere from April to November. So they're not always going to see harvest. They might just see a cranberry bog. And we educate them about cranberries there. And then we have the public ones during the fall, during harvest season. So if we get this educational center off the ground, if it all comes to fruition, we're hoping to be able to do much more tours and a lot more out of that facility. But right now, there's those opportunities. Then there's other cranberry growers who offer tours as well. So on our website, besides us at the association, there are other growers who offer tours to the public. that
On
people
their
can-
own cranberry
yeah,
farms.
on their own, exactly. And they're all listed on our website. So lots of different opportunities for
Good.
folks.
I think it's important for the school children to get the information too.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it might spark a fire in their desire to go into cranberries, like you did.
Right, exactly. Because I grew up literally a quarter of a mile from a cranberry bog, didn't know anything about it until I got into the industry. And we're finding the same thing in our local communities. People don't just know what cranberries are about and really don't even know that that's a possible career path for them. And that's one of the factors that we're working on right now is workforce development. It's one of the challenges. I know we're facing it through all of our businesses
Yep.
throughout the country, but our culture in particular is really hard hit trying to find that next generation workforce. So we're hoping to increase the awareness that cranberries can be a career path for someone who likes to work outside and be independent. There's that, but there's also in the shop jobs too, fabricators and welders and positions like that. And then on the bigger companies that have financial people and marketing and sales and whatnot. So there's a lot of opportunities for work right here in the industry that most people don't even think about.
Yeah. Wow. Excellent.
Yeah. So
Okay. Well, I hope this has been informative for the people. Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
yeah, just I think it's always important for people in the community to understand what's going on the farm because there's cranberry farms that can be quite beautiful to look at, but they're also working agricultural land. Sometimes they have noises and smells and things going on. And so I encourage neighbors to get to know their grower if they can, so they can form a relationship there. Sometimes it's not always easy to find that person or get to know them. We're at the association a resource if a neighbor's having a problem or a question, we could help them with understand what's going on. On our website, there's a lot of information about what's going on in a cranberry bog. Why is that helicopter flying? Why is that truck bringing sand into it? Why is sand leaving the bog? I mean, the earth and the removal of it is sometimes part of cranberry growing as well, besides just the berries themselves. So there's a lot to a modern bog that many people don't quite understand, and I think it's just helpful to try to educate yourself.
Yeah, that's
so
a
you
good
can
idea.
learn what's going on out there, and I think that's very important for people to understand, because once you know and can better recognize what's going on, it really helps with the relationship between your neighbor.
Yep, good, excellent point. So I do want to say that this is Coffee and Conversation, Carver Coffee and Conversation, and we're celebrating Honeydew right around the corner, probably the best coffee in town. So I want to thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers to you, and thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming in.
Happy to be
This
here.
has been informative, and until the next time, Bob Fennessy and Brian Wick. Thank you.